The allure of conspiracy theories are always going to be a pet peeve for many and also a thrilling experience for many. And that's because people would rather be like children at a campfire, being told a very scary story for an adult, knowing full well that maybe it's to be believed or maybe it's not. The real horror, the horrifying reality is that people don't really want to know about the real horrors that are happening in their name, past and present. 9/11 basically is imbued with these very fringe conspiracy theories, ridiculous theories. Uh, People like Judy Wood, where the towers are actually melting, concrete and steel are basically just dustified. Meanwhile, human remains and bodies can be found. Somehow they don't burn up in these heat waves that are coming out of the sky, in which, I don't know even know what machines they're using at that point, or that CG holograms actually crashed into the towers, and everybody who saw a plane actually saw a hologram, even when it comes to sound or the plane debris that was emitted out of the World Trade Center. The Pentagon was hit by a missile. In fact, imagine, the one area of the world where you can basically discern a plane from a missile is going to be used. They're going to use a missile at a military outpost, and that everyone who saw a plane is either with the program or just coerced into lying that the plane debris was actually planted. Shanksville, there was no plane debris there, and everybody that was there is basically in on it. All the first responders, while Miller didn't find whole bodies, but he found small bodies because a whole body can miraculously survive a plane going 563 miles an hour, holding 38,000 gallons of fuel. George Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Benjamin Netanyahu, all conspired in a room and allowed the 9/11 attacks to happen, that the hijackers are patsies or they're still alive. They're out there making you go one way to another, and then you go down the one hole and down another, and you never really get anywhere because there's so many conspiracies, so many fringe conspiracies, and they're all alluring. You see, there it is. The government's in on it. Israel's in on it, whatever, right? If only 9/11 was as simple as they make it out to be, I wouldn't have spent 16 years, going on 17 now, pulling every hair out of my head or reading tens of thousands of documents and files and books relating to this subject. Because I could assure you that those who believe in these theories that I mentioned have never really read anything outside of those that acquiesce to those views. If you believe a missile hit the Pentagon, well, you're going to be reading Thierry Mason. If you believe that the World Trade Center was melted by space beams, you're only reading Judy Wood. You're not reading 9/11 Commission Report, the Joint House Inquiry Report, the Pent Bomb Report, Operation Encore, the Counterstrail documents, the millions of pages that were released under the National Archives. Why? Because all of these conspiracies have one thing in common, even though they all differ from each other and they are always fighting against one another, is that they all agree that the official narrative is false. In other words, they're not reading the Commission Report. They're not reading the Joint House Inquiry or the Operation Encore files. In other words, they're not going to find the actual missing pieces of 9/11. The real conspiracies that are shown in the Counterstrail documents or the Gerald Shea memo or the Operation Encore files, where there's a real conspiracy being hidden right under your nose, a cover-up involving foreign and domestic intelligence pre-9/11. There it is. You know what they're not talking about? Well, they're not talking about the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and how that connects to 9/11. They're not talking about the Bajinka plot, which is where the idea of 9/11 came from. They're not talking about the Millennium Plot or the 1998 East Africa bombings, which is what bin Laden and Al Qaeda declared war on the United States well before 9/11 even happened. They're not talking about the foreign policy guidelines of Paul Wolfowitz or the Oded Yanon plan. They're not talking about how Israeli intelligence, through the Gerald Shea memo, have been living next door to not just the 9/11 hijackers, but also to the DEA. They don't read any of this information. They don't understand the rise of Wahhabism, the rise of Zionism, the rise of U.S. nationalism, which is acquiescing to Zionism and to an extent Wahhabism. They're all fundamentally very ultra-Orthodox right. Not talking about any of these things because their view of 9/11 is quite limited. And if you already have a pre-arranged judgment about 9/11, if you already come into 9/11 thinking that it is an inside job, well, then you're only looking at evidence that caters to that worldview. And there's your first mistake. You're only going to agree with people that agree with you. And this is the false view of the world. You're basically not going to understand how the world really operates. In which I will tell you right now, the conspiracies you believe in are minuscule, transparent to the actual conspiracies involving 9/11, which are quite capricious and expansive. But the subjects you'll have to understand are many. And you're already at a disposition because 22 years later, where is the 9/11 Truth Movement? Well, last year I went to Ground Zero. There was maybe 15 of them. They're dead in the water. There needs to be a new movement of people that don't acquiesce to these ridiculous theories or these ridiculous people. Level-headed, rational mindsets that are after one thing, the truth, information, knowledge, not lies, not conspiracies or belief, fringe conspiracies anyway, or belief. And this is the danger of fringe conspiracies because they just don't stop at 9/11. They expand into the JFK assassination, to Sandy Hook, chemtrails, COVID. Not saying that the narratives given to us by the government are correct either. They're incomplete. The government's 2 congressional inquiries were not false. They were incomplete. And the Truth Movement gets that wrong because they say, well, the official narrative is false. No, it's not. The official narrative is incomplete. There were 19 hijackers. There were more. There were 4 planes. There were more. And some of you are stuck at Ground Zero. Can't get out of the World Trade Center. Just like the victims of the World Trade Center. You have made victims of your own, in which you are too trapped under the rubble, in a metaphorical sense. And the mistake you're making is to put your faith in these biased views of 9/11. I made this mistake very long ago when I studied religion. I became an anti-theist, but what I didn't realize was that I became the very person I hated on the other side of that fence. I became an overt and very virtually mentally extremist on that sense. And when I realized what I became, so what do I really know? When I studied monotheism a little bit further, I understood that there is a difference between religion and spirituality. It took me a while to understand that. And I applied that thinking to 9/11. I didn't go into 9/11 thinking that the government is guilty. that Saudi Arabia is guilty, that Israel is guilty. I started with a clean slate. That's what I did, clean slate. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. You read the 9/11 Commission report, you read the Joint House Inquiry report, and then after that, you read Pet Bomb, Operation Encore, Canistrail document, Gerald Shea memo, and then all of a sudden, they can fill in those blanks that are missing in those reports. And then you can listen to people who spoke out against the commission, who tried to give the commission information, like Anthony Schaefer from Able Danger, like Eric Kleinsmith from Able Danger, or like Ken Williams did with his Phoenix memo in the year 2001, like Thomas Drake, the biggest whistleblower of my time, and the NSA monitoring the Al-Qaeda communications hub in Yemen many years prior to 9/11, or Bin Laden's satellite phone in the mid-90s. How about the Israeli rings that were operating in the year 2000, 2001 inside the United States, monitoring the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, as well as the planes operators in the Hamburg cell in Florida, New Jersey, New York, California, and Texas, and Oklahoma, and Minnesota. What about the Saudis and their operatives inside the United States, like Omar al-Bayoumi, Fahad al-Tamari, Osama al-Basnan, Muwasset al-Jarrah, who were giving logistical and financial support to two known al-Qaeda operatives that were traveling from an al-Qaeda Malaysia summit meeting in Malaysia, which the intelligence services knew, coming inside the United States, and it was kept hidden from the FBI and the State Department. That's what I just laid out, aren't in any of the commission reports. So we can fill in some blanks. And as you can understand, now you understand why I'm saying that those commission inquiries are incomplete. They're not wrong, they're incomplete. So to you people that fell victim to people like Christopher Bolin, or Rebecca Roth, or Judy Wood, Barbara Honegger, or Jason Burmis, and the dozens of others. You know that there's a conspiracy, but you're blaming the wrong people. And you're looking at dead ends because those people are basically leading you to dead ends that lead to nowhere. And that you need to look at all the information to get an understanding of what you're against and why you're against it and why you won't read it. Because the government doesn't work in a black and white world. It's not as simple as that. They don't just basically lie all the time. They have to win over your trust by giving you nuggets of truth every once in a while. This is something that Alex Jones does all the time. He'll say something that's truthful. Next minute, he goes off the rails, takes off his shirt, gets drunk. You think it's funny. I think it's a tragedy. Because we don't need Alex Jones in our life. We don't need Jim Fetzers in our life. We don't need these platforms that claim they're for the truth, like Tim Pool or CNN or Alex Jones and InfoWars. We need a nonpartisan, level-headed person that's dedicated to only the truth, information, because information is power. That's why it's kept from us. I mean, we can get some of it. We can't get all of it. Meanwhile, you know, the state and the intelligence services are awash with disinformation. Not lies, just disinformation. What's to be believed, what's not. You're always thinking every second of the day. It's a stress on you. It's a mental stress to live in a visual field of a 24-hour paranoia. You don't have to live like that. And yeah, it's going to be very hard to lead that circle of friendship because it's very broad and they're very tight knit, but they're not loyal. And you'll understand that once you step out. And the problems that are going to come with it are not real world problems. They're actually good problems to have because now you're on your way to basically reaffirming that the world that you once believed in was built on a shield of disinformation or misinformation. And that you're going to see a gray area of how the world really operates and how the state, the intelligence services, foreign governments are meant to do one thing and confuse you. They're not to give you definitive yeses or nos. This is meant to divide you and confuse you from each other, always in a state of conflict mentally. My channel, I try to do the best I can to remain nonpartisan, to remain dedicated to only providing information, because what I want is my reward for doing this is to have you become empowered with knowledge. That's my reward. And for you to share that knowledge with others. This knowledge won't cause a divide, it'll unify the public, which is what they're afraid of in the first place. The very thing they don't want is an educated, self-righteous, self-respecting, unified public that will hold them accountable for the crimes that they commit or the crimes they allow and benefit from. And 9/11 is a great axis to start because there is a lot of conspiracy involving 9/11, but there are also a lot of false ones as well. I don't want you to believe anything. I want you to know something. And so I'll end it like this. We could believe all these conspiracies, the fringe conspiracies, and that they're still continuing, that the government's a giant monolith, that they're an amoeba that stretches out and is vast and powerful, that they're seemingly omniscient and omnipresent. They're everywhere, could do anything, create miracles. The horrifying reality is that they're human just like us, infallible. They make mistakes, but their power lies in the fear of manipulation and brainwashing you in general. You don't have to fall for that game. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching the video. See you in the next one.